Welcome to the Selling Later Real Estate Panel, Dallas-Fort Worth edition. Today is one of my favorite interviews because we're going to be talking with Lindy Chapman. Lindy is a real estate agent and a 10 times relocation client. She's one of the few people I know that will talk to consumers and guide them on the best way to sell based on what works for them, not what works for her. So whether you're selling on your own, thinking of using a 1% commission agent, or using a traditional one, there are some key tips in this interview you need to pay attention to get yourself ready to sell and sell the way that works best for you by avoiding common consumer traps. So let's dive into it with Lindy.
So I was a relocation client a dozen times. We've moved around the country as well as internationally. And on our move to Dallas, it was a really challenging move. First of all, it was a seller's market. So there was not much on the market. And what was going in multiple offers. We only had a week to find a house. And it's one of the reasons why I love selling later, because it would have been really helpful for us to have seen what was coming on the market later, because we were there on our spring break trip looking in April, but we weren't moving until July or August. But we were limited to the homes that were on the market that week. But anyway, I had a challenging experience. How do you pick a real estate agent? Nobody had ever taught us that or trained us that, even though with the relocation company, we would often either be assigned an agent or we had to work with a certain brokerage. But even within that, knowing the questions to ask and to realize maybe we needed to, especially when moving to a city as large as Dallas-Fort Worth, finding a local agent, finding out where we want to live. What is the difference between Frisco and Southlake, or Dallas and Fort Worth? And then narrowing down our search to find a real estate agent to help us. And that particular move was really made difficult because we didn't choose the right agent. She wasn't a bad agent. She just wasn't the right one for numerous reasons. And we didn't get the school help that we needed. And we didn't get the guidance that we needed. We didn't have somebody there after the transaction closed. So that's when I became a real estate agent, was after that move, because I thought we've got to be able to do this better.
Right. And then, so what was the biggest eye opener for you after becoming a real estate agent? I know there was that one situation with the fire chief with wanting to navigate his selling options, right?
You know, as an agent, and one of the things I'm excited to be solving with DOS Social, as an agent, you have no idea how expensive the business is to get started in. I had no idea that when I would sell a house that the real estate brokerage was going to take 40 or even 50%. Or that I was going to have to pay $200 fees to that brokerage just for the privilege of being there, that I would be required to be there certain hours, a number of hours a week, to answer phones for free. Not to mention all of the local and the national fees, the fees that you have to spend to get your e-key to open doors, or to get access to MLS, or to be a member of the National Association of Realtors. All those fees add up to thousands of dollars after you get your real estate license before you've made a dime. So I didn't realize that I didn't have any control or flexibility within the brokerage that I chose to put my client's needs first. The story you just referenced was the fire chief of our little town who was selling his house for sale by owner. And he was determined to sell it for sale by owner. He knew every real estate agent in town. So I offered him a few tips. He'd been on the market 6 weeks. He took my few tips and it sold that weekend. My broker found out about it because one of the agents who he was raving over me helping him told my broker, or my manager at the time. And she was really upset with me, and I couldn't figure out why she was upset. And she just finally said, if you do things like that, then we can't pay for our bills for this building. And that was kind of my eye-opening moment of, I'm not in this business to work for the consumer. I'm in this business to work for the broker. The broker is in this business. And Bobby Bryant wrote an article recently that talked about his first eye-opening experience 20 years ago, when the speaker on stage said, you cannot serve two masters. Brokers are in the business to serve real estate agents. At Inman, I heard a VP of one of the big real estate brokerages say the same thing. We are in this business to serve real estate agents. And as a consumer, you've got to understand that. That doesn't mean they're not good realtors out there. There are fantastic agents out there that really are there to serve. But you have to understand what somebody's motive is before you trust them.
Right. And it's funny you mentioned Inman because that's how we met, not
Yeah.
not at Inman, but right after.
Right. I
And
missed you on the stage. I missed
I
you.
know one day we'll be together in person. But the one thing that I've learned so much from you in regards to what the consumer's missing, because I was just a consumer. I've only built Selling Later based on what I wish I would have had, and now it's based on like what I wish I would have known.
Hmm.
And which is why I wanted to have you on the panel as someone that can guide consumers on selling options, because you're the only person I know that is totally comfortable saying, hey, you can sell this on your own, you can do it, or no, you like maybe use an agent, or you're going to need a lot of help, you need a full service agent.
Hmm.
And so if you could quickly explain some of the options consumers have other than a traditional agent, and again, like a traditional agent might be a better option for you, but if you have the time, what other options are there out there for you?
I tell people all the time, it's not a one size fits all. It's you do have different options, which has made it really confusing for the consumer, because now you have all these different broker models that all operate on different fee structures. But you absolutely can sell for sale by owner. NAR did a study saying that for sale by owners sell for 13% less, but there are other studies that debunk that, and it's not true, because you just have to know the right way to do it. So for sale by owner, if you do it right, and that's what my course is on, you can do it. And not everybody's going to be able to do it successfully. And I a lot of times will tell people, don't sell for, you're not designed to be a for sale by owner for a number of different reasons, but some clients are. And so it's just knowing the questions to ask. And it's a wide variety of factors: your personality, what time do you have? Because time is money. If you need to sell quickly, you probably need to list it with a real estate agent. And then what are the different, I just recently did 2 consults. I did it for a lady selling a home that was $350,000, and for another homeowner that was selling a $2 million home. And I researched the neighborhoods. The home in the $350,000 neighborhood, the top listing agent that had sold at the highest price for the fewest number of days was a known discount agent, or flat fee. I would rather use that word,
Mhm.
because I don't think of them as discount. If they did it at a good job for a lower fee, that's not discount. That's a bargain.
Right.
That's it's and so, but that was who had sold the highest priced home in the neighborhood. So she didn't need to pay 6% commissions. The home in the $2 million neighborhood, though, the one flat fee agent that operated in there, their home had been on the market for the longest number of days and sold for one of the lower prices per square foot, and one of the lower prices in the neighborhood. And there were several brokers that stood out. And so I was able to help connect her to not only a top selling broker in the neighborhood, but an agent that actually lived in that neighborhood. Because I always tell people, that's where you really need to figure out, if you're going to list, you've got to come up with a listing strategy. Not every agent's the same. Not every agent has the same motivation. Not every agent knows your neighborhood as well. You need somebody that has the same passion for your neighborhood, and really does have your equity in mind when they're pricing it.
Right. And it's funny you mentioned the discount agent term, because it was on my list to talk to you. Who thought of that name? Because technically, any agent, there's no set commission, right? Like they say
Well, that's
there's like
why we
a
have all these lawsuits right now.
right. Legally, there's no set commission, but you have agents that will lower what
Mhm.
they are comfortable with for
Yep.
friends and family, or if you buy and sell with them. And so that's discounting in my mind. So like, I don't think that's a fair term. And which is why I'm excited for you and Bobby and his term of a
Well,
fair
he has
price
3
service,
different
right?
options. He offers, and he even is offering a for sale by owner option for people that list with DOS, which has not been done and is interesting. But yeah, I don't like the word discount, right? It's a fee for service. And a lot of times I would do that with clients. I would start out at 6%, 3% to me, but then I would give them a sliding scale of, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And for everything you do up to a certain dollar amount, we're going to reduce my fee by that, because then I'm delivered a home where they have staged it, where they've gotten a storage unit and decluttered. They've painted the kitchen cabinets. They've boarded the dog. I learned a long time ago, it's really hard to sell a house with the dog in it. It just doesn't always, and it's also complicated for the seller, because you got to pack the dog up and leave. but they can afford to board the dog for a week or to send it to a friend's house, or maybe they go and move out for a week. And then we reduce the commission by that much. And then I have a house that's going to sell. And that's worth whatever percentage or whatever dollar amount that I knock off. So I don't see it as a discount. I really see it as a collaborative effort.
Right. And I think it's important to highlight, we talk about fair priced and what DOS is doing. And consumers aren't aware that, how DOS is structured is different than some of the other sites. Like there's some companies that say they'll have an agent sell your home for 1%, but they're not an actual brokerage. They're just shuffling you off to find a traditional agent that'll do it for 1%. And then you have to question, like, what kind of service are you going to get if they're taking that plus what they pay to their brokerage? Right. So, are there any tips do you simply just ask, like, is this 1%, do they work for you, or are you shuffling this off to someone else? Is that a fair question?
That's a totally fair question. And I always say, commissions don't sell houses. And so, but if you're just paying 1%, you're not getting, that's not what sells a house, how much you pay or how little you pay. It's really a number of factors. You've got to have proactive marketing. You've got to have great photography. You don't have to have shiny brochures. The only person really that cares about that shiny brochure is the person who ends up buying that home. And the agent who it's marketing, because that's really what that's for. But you do need to have a great social media presence. When somebody goes onto Zillow or whatever search site they're using, to have great photos, to have video, because video is so key now. And that's the beauty of a company like DOS, where everything is streamlined and everything is even across the board, where you can take a big brokerage, and agent A is going to have a totally different photographer than agent B and agent C. And there's no uniformity between those listings. So unless you really know the agent you're hiring and what they're going to do, it doesn't matter, again, if you're paying 1% or 3% to that listing agent. You may not be getting what you paid for.
Right. And I guess too, for like the fair price model, these are your employees and these are your agents, and things are probably structured a bit differently on how the agent's compensated, but some of the websites out there are honestly just finding traditional agents within a traditional brokerage structure and telling them to sell it for 1%. And then, that chunk of what they're earning goes back to their brokerage, and it's not the same model. And so you have to worry, like, are you going to get at least a service? Are you going to get attention?
Yeah. And I always tell people it's a good idea to ask and find out what your agent's broker split is. You want to work with an agent who's making 90%, 100% of the commission, or do you want to work with somebody that's making 50%? That creates a different level of service that they can offer, especially depending on how high a need of client you are. Right? A lot of times when I do referrals, by the time I've done it as a referral, I've already helped the client to identify the house, the neighborhood and stuff, and the referral agent only has to write a contract. And in that case, I would say if they're paying me a referral fee and then they're paying another 20 or 30% to the broker, they're still getting paid adequately for what they've done. But on the other hand, if like a relocation company or a brokerage that's taking 40 to 50%, which is not uncommon of the agent's, commission, and then that client needs, if they're buying, they need 5 days of house hunting and plus all the work that goes into negotiating a contract and making sure that the repairs are done and following through to the closing, you may not get what you paid for. Same thing with listing. If they're only getting 50%, brokers don't pay for marketing. In a traditional brokerage, you pay for it, the agent does. And so they don't have the money left to do the appropriate marketing or the motivation perhaps to do the number of open houses that need to be done. And I think that's the beauty of a company like DOS, where that's more unified and uniform.
Right. And then, so for those that are considering listing their home at some point this year, what are some things that you talk about in your course that you think are very important for sellers to start thinking about now versus when they're ready to pull the trigger?
Well, the first thing I tell people, they need to check with their sphere of influence before they sell their house. Find out who you know and who they know that are looking to buy a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home in your neighborhood. Because it is amazing how often I've done that with my sellers before we listed and they ended up finding somebody. Then I would get paid to basically write out the contract and to follow it through. And it was a win-win for everybody. So you owe that to yourself. You've got a huge sphere of influence these days with your Instagram, with your social media, with your neighbor's social media, that you can do that. The biggest mistake people make, though, is pricing it wrong, whether they're selling it for sale by owner or trusting a real estate agent to list it, to price it fairly. I've gone up against real estate agents and I've lost the listing to agents that have told the seller 10% more than the market price to get the listing. And then those houses didn't sell. But we call it buying the listing. It's a very common practice. And it's a shame, and it wastes the seller's time. It wastes their equity, because by the time it does get priced correctly, it's been on the market for a long time, and a stale house just doesn't command the same price after it's been on the market for a certain number of days. So you've got to make sure you price it correctly. So I usually tell people to do a couple of different things. One, go ahead and get an appraisal. You can pay for an appraisal. Different markets and different price homes are going to be different, but $500 or so. And you can get not like a bank appraisal, so it's a little different than a lender. It's going to be an appraisal of value. And then is your home $500,000 or is it $485,000? You don't want to price a $500,000 home at $509,000, because if it's in a $485,000 neighborhood, it's never going to be found. And then that way, though, and then you've got evidence, right? I'm selling for sale by owner. Here's an appraisal. My home is worth $485,000. It's hard for an agent to argue against that. It's hard but as an agent, I know agents overprice homes all the time. But if I come in and I've got a buyer and you have an appraisal showing me that the appraiser says the home is worth $500,000, not the real estate agent, that holds a lot more value, because we are not qualified to be appraisers. We can only give an opinion of value.
Right. It's funny you mentioned that, because, on a lot of those forums, they'll say, well, my agent told me my home is going to be worth this, and why wouldn't I? I'm like, well, you should get options. But like, if an agent's pricing was accurate, like, lenders would use it. But there's a reason why lenders use an appraisal versus like an agent's opinion on things.
My parents just, it's funny. They actually called agents and they didn't call me first. And my mother called me and she's like, we got 3 different, we had agents telling us everything from $475,000 to $575,000 for our home. And I'm like, it's probably somewhere in the middle. And so I went this was in North Carolina, and interviewed agents and found out what the right price was, talked to an appraiser. The other thing that we did that I think is really advisable a lot of times is we went ahead and did the inspection. Now, again, the way the industry operates, you put your house on the market, you say it's this price, then you get the buyer to do the inspection, and then the buyer comes back and says, I know we offered you $500,000, but now we want to offer you $485,000 because we found all these things wrong. The seller's unhappy, the buyer's unhappy because the seller doesn't want to come down the price. Why don't we operate like CarMax? You go in, here's the car, here's the Carfax. This is what's, we fixed everything that's wrong, and this is the price.
Right.
And that's really the way it doesn't work. But again, Bobby wrote another great article last week, Bobby Bryant, the founder of DOS, on how real estate industry, the agents really operate as gatekeepers. And that's one of the way they stay relevant, and they continue to charge these 3%, because it's a very complicated process. But technology really allows it to not be so complicated anymore. But if we make it less complicated, then we even create less work for the real estate agents to do. And it's even harder for them to justify those fees. And it's not the agents that are making the money. Again, you have to go back and look at who's making the money in this industry. And it's not your real estate agents.
Right. And who's paying for it all, which is the sellers and buyers.
It's the seller. I mean, it is. It's ultimately the seller's equity that's paying for it.
Right.
I don't know if you ever saw my interview with Deepak Seth, who went over the Economist article, but I would highly recommend for anybody to, I can't remember the name of the article, but I think it was from February. When was it? Of 2019. It was an article in the Economist on the price of commissions. It's really fascinating.
Right. He's the data man. I always love listening to him talk and talking about like how much lobbying power NAR has, and the $60-some million they spend on lobbying every year. And it's scary, because as just a consumer, you're like, well, who's looking out for me? Like who is setting up?
And that's why we have so many lawsuits against our industry. There are not, it's not about the consumer. This industry is about the real estate agent and about the broker, and the brokers are making money on the real estate agents. There are currently right now, I think I read an article the other day, there's around a million homes or less on the market in the US And there's almost 1.5 million members of NAR right now, of the National Association of Realtors. But that doesn't even include agents in New York City and other cities that aren't members of NAR. They have their own associations. And you begin to see, and it goes back to, I don't know if you've listened to Carl Slade, but he talks about elevating our profession from being salespeople to professionals. Right now, we're operating as salespeople, and it's this very competitive dog eat dog, because you've got more agents than you have listings.
Right.
In a typical year, you've got 1.4 million realtors and about 5 million homes sold. You do the math, it's not good.
Right. And 100,000, according to Steve Lester, is like 100,000, 100 million leads, 100 million leads sold to agents with your information.
Right.
So 100 million leads for 5 million homes. So how many times are they sold and to who?
Right.
The one thing we talked about, which I would love to help explain to consumers, is this agent exclusivity. When you talk to an agent and they tell you, well, I could make this an exclusive with our brokerage. Like, what does that mean and who does that benefit?
Don't even get me started on that right now. I'm here in Dallas looking for a home.
Yeah, shameless plug. What are you looking for and where?
Exactly.
In case anybody's looking.
In the M streets in Lower Greenville is where I would prefer to be, but looking for a 4 or 5 bedroom home, 4-bedroom home would be fine. So it's interesting. Homes are either really overpriced here because they know everybody's moving from California and New York, so eventually somebody might pay it, or they're exclusives. And by the time I get to see it, because it doesn't go into MLS, I can only see it as part of that broker, it's sold. Because you've got 1,000 agents and they have their exclusives that they get in their inbox, and then they've got 1,000 agents sending it out to their buyers. And by the time it's public, it's sold. Well, here's the challenge with that. So as a seller, it doesn't hurt the seller, except for now I'm kind of like, okay, do I go with a flat fee service brokerage that doesn't do that and pay maybe less in commissions, which may or may not benefit me? Or do I work with one of these brokerages and hope I pick the right one that happens to have the relocation client? Because this is part of the problem with the industry, is the relocation part. Because again, a lot of these brokerages, the relocation companies, work exclusively with these top brokerages. And so they are sending in their like me, I was the corporate relocation client from California, from New York, or from Europe. And well, not Europe now at the moment, but and I get, I might get a sneak peek. But here's the challenge. Let's say I'm working with broker X. Well, I'm not seeing broker Y or broker Z's exclusive listings. So the whole market's not available to me. This goes back to, we've got this industry that's being a gatekeeper. Our technology allows for that to be opened up and to have it more work better for the consumer. And,
right.
and we've got to be about the consumer.
Right.
And
that's like partially why I made selling later, is I just look at, like, when you're thinking about selling and there's nothing you can do, but it's also like, if sellers and buyers are paying for this whole industry, like, why don't you have access to everything? Like, you should know when things are selling and where they're selling, and having that exclusivity really is just a benefit for the brokerage to get it on both ends from the deal.
I love your why behind creating it in your story, because why should it punish me to have my house on the market for more than 30 days? But then I don't want to put it on the market 30 days before I'm moving, because what if it doesn't sell? So it's a real challenge. But if I can see everybody's home that's going to be selling in 60 days and 90 days, a year out, because I'm not in a hurry. And you think about our society now and how we've changed, right? The demographics, the number of people like me that are empty nesters, and I want to sell my big house and downsize, but I can do it this month. I can do it in a year from now when the right house on the golf course comes up, or when the small home that's all one level and has 3 bedrooms on the main floor, right? Whatever that criteria is. It makes so much more sense to do it that way. Technology allows for it to be done that way, but it changes the traditional broker model. It changes the dynamics of this exclusivity and the way it's operated. And, these broker models will no longer, they can't operate, just like Blockbuster couldn't operate when Netflix, right? And unless they had changed their entire model of renting videos, they couldn't continue to operate the way they were operating.
Right.
And it's the same thing for these broker models. They're formed on a business model that will not, unless they fundamentally overhaul it, it will not operate on a new innovative model.
And that's the hard part. It's like it takes these lawsuits and these conversations and people working together just to point this stuff out, because as a consumer, like you don't know how bad it is until you're in the process and you're like, wait a minute, like how did
I had
you?
no idea. I mean, I had moved, almost a dozen times, which meant, buying and selling on each side. So, and I didn't understand exactly how it operated until I became the consumer. You should be talking to my husband on this, because he talks about it and he says, Lindy, your industry is like a cartel. And he said, when you have a monopoly, innovation can't exist within a monopoly. And that's kind of how it feels. And it's why some of these companies like Redfin and Open Door have really struggled, because they've gone so far from the traditional model. And I used to work with agents and they would not show these particular homes. There's one company that I thought was brilliant in Dallas that did a flat fee listing and just but they were on a different operating system. So they weren't even playing by the same rules as agents. And so I could understand agents not showing those homes unless the consumer said, I want to see that home, because it was a lot of extra effort. It wasn't a lot of extra effort, but it was extra effort. And we had our own way of doing things. And so to ask an agent to do something different, it just made them angry. And again, what I love about DOS is we're really trying to bridge that gap between the way it used to be, or the way it is and is changing, and where we think the future of real estate is going. And for DOS social agents, we're brand agnostic. We understand that there is not a one size fits all. We understand that you may not need to list with a flat fee. You may not need to list with DOS. That may not be the right company for you. Same thing with being a buyer's agent. There are several things that it doesn't matter the brokerage with the buyer's agent to me. It matters what your commission split is, your location. It matters to me that you have the right amount of time that client needs, and that there's a little bit of a personality matchup, because there is a personal thing, especially when you're talking about relocation from another state to a city like Dallas.
Right. And it's interesting talking with some other people on the panel and talking about when you're buying and having someone that actually knows where you're buying, instead of like taking you on as a client because they want money, versus like, I actually like Amy Jacobs. Like she just spent like an hour telling me about every school in the northern suburbs of Dallas. And I'm like, well, how do you find people like that? And hopefully, as DOS Social develops, like it's the best way to share that education without the pressure.
One of the people, Kelly Harquist, is one of the people whose home I'm actually in right now, is one of the people coming on as a DOS social agent. And she's worked in relocation. She's been a DS, she's trained DSCs, and she gets it. And I think that's strategy, and having strategy and creating a plan for somebody that's moving is very different than just trying to be a salesperson and get that next commission.
Yeah. And that's going to be your biggest asset too, as a moving somewhere new or moving in general. Someone that has their thumb on the neighborhood and the market is going to be 10 times more helpful than someone who has no clue, even where the local grocery store is.
Right. And another big challenge for us, even moving to Texas, we were living in Germany at the time and coming in, and never lived in Texas before. We were working with a Texas agent that, even though she was the top relocation agent for this well-known company, didn't understand some of the nuances of a family moving in from Germany with 2 kids in college and 2 in high school and 1 on their way out, and needing help with schools, and really missed an opportunity to show us the IB school that was around the corner, and to tell me about the international club that was in the town where I bought a home. But I didn't learn about it until 6 months later. It had a funny name. And so even though I searched it, it took me 6 months to finally find it. Mm-hmm. And that was a missed opportunity for her. And it delayed my ability to be able to transition. And so I think one of the things I've loved doing is developing a database of agents that have actually been expats, that have been the relocation client, that are from California, that are from New York, that are from different parts of the country. Because that can be a really nice thing to connect with other people that understand, even though you're excited about moving to this new city, it's different. And it's not that unlike sometimes an expat move, or the language is the same, but everything else is different.
Right. the politics, the behaviors, the social gestures.
The
It's
way they
all.
dress,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
friendliness, it really catches people off guard. They're like, what do they want from me? Do they sell Amway? Are they,
Right, right. I remember the one time we went to, I think it was, I think it was in New York, and we were getting on the subway, and everybody just like shoves in, and you're like, out of my way." And then in Pittsburgh, like when you get on the T, everyone's like waiting their turn.
yeah,
And so when I went to New York, I was like, man, like, excuse me, like, sorry, I wasn't in your way, but it's just like, you just go, like it's just not how it operates there.
and
And
here you check out at the grocery store, and by the time you leave, Sally, who's checking you out, she's your best friend.
right, right. I think I would take that any day over. I don't know. Maybe I'm just desperate to talk to people because I'm stuck at home so much. Maybe, I don't know. Is there anything else in your seller's course or anything you think is important for sellers to know while
No,
they're
I think
considering?
you've got to know what you don't know. You have to know what's right for you. I always say it's not that it's not that they're bad agents. It's just it's a matter of really finding the right agent and the right strategy for your particular needs. And I go back to it's not one size fits all. And so I've always, since I quit listing homes, and if anybody wants to know more about that, they can Google my name and Forbes, and they can find the article to explain why. But since I quit listing homes, I really operated more as a consultant, and that's why I always use the hashtag Not Your Realtor, because I found myself saying that more often than not, because again, it's that do unto others as you would have them do unto you kind of rule. I wanted people to tell me what I wish my real estate agents had said. Hey, Lindy, you know what? I've got other clients in town this week. I am not going to be the best agent for you, but let me connect you to somebody who is.
Mhm.
Or, Lindy, I don't live and work in that area, and I'm not going to be the best listing agent. Or, your house really isn't worth that much. I've overpriced it. And so, or what you're telling me you want to list it for is overpriced. And if they lose the listing, they lose the listing. People need a neutral advisor. And so that's really kind of what I ended up. And I found that I got more and more business by being a neutral advisor and trying to be a trusted advisor versus trying to sell people on using me exclusively.
Right.
Because I wasn't always the best agent. And I found I'm probably much a better a consultant than I am even a real estate agent. There are really great agents out there they've been in the business for so long, and they know certain areas. Like if you're going to buy a condo, I'm going to send you to a condo specialist. I'm not going to send you to an agent that has sold 1 or 2 condos in their life. If you're going to list your farm and ranch, you're going to have a farm and ranch agent that owns a truck, a pickup truck. You're not going to list with the nice lady or the nice gentleman who specializes in downtown apartments or condos.
Right. Because someone told you they do a good job, but
not that they're a bad agent, but
right.
they're not the right agent. So at DOS, that's really what we're doing is we're matchmakers. Mm-hmm. And there's a sense of accountability with that too, right? When I refer somebody to an agent, I'm going to be checking up. And there's a sense of, and that agent wants more of those referrals. And this is a very different referral than HomeLight or some of these other companies that you see out there that are really a pay to play. Mm-hmm. This is much more of a thought out, methodical, and also a lower fee. And there's a sense of accountability and a sense of the consumer getting 2 agents for the price of 1.
Right. I think the whole program needs an overhaul. So I'm excited to see
it
how
absolutely
it works.
does. It absolutely does. And I think the companies that are going to survive are going to be the ones that are going to continue to be able to evolve rather than trying to maintain the status quo. Saul Klein, I think you've connected with him. I love how he describes it and he talks about how managers manage, but leaders lead change, they innovate. And you've got a lot of people that are trying to manage change and they're trying to bring on more agents and they're creating new technology, but the technology is really to attract more real estate agents because mm-hmm. that is how the model is built. The model is built to make money off of real estate agents. And then there are the companies like DOS and like others and like Selling Later that are like, okay, we've got this technology. How can we harness it for the good of the consumer and make money? Because we're in the business to make money, but how can we do it and be consumer centric? And the companies that can be consumer centric and not just agent centric are the companies that are going to win.
Right.